Wow! Did you hear that? Tariffs have been paused. This is fantastic news. Nah, I'm just kidding you. It's not news. Here's why. So, a few days ago, Trump announced that he was going to impose tariffs on pretty much the rest of the world, and that's because he wanted to make our economy particularly strong. And of course, the rest of the world reacted by imposing retaliatory tariffs, which set off a trade war. And that trade war was felt primarily in the stock markets around the world, including the United States, which lost trillions of dollars in just a matter of hours. Then today, Trump announces that those tariffs have been suspended. And he sells it to you as great news because there were countries literally lined up to make a trade deal with the United States. Except, that's not true at all. The suspension is not based on a reciprocal agreement with any country. For example, the European Union had immediately announced very heavy retaliatory tariffs and kept the door open saying that they were willing to suspend them as long as the United States and the European Union could come to an agreement. Well, guess what? The United States announced that they were suspending their tariffs, but Europe hasn't made an announcement yet. Now, they could go back to the original tariffs, but guess what that means? It means that the situation will be exactly what it was before Trump's tariffs went into place. And that's true of basically every country in the world. If they go back to the original tariffs, we will go back to the exact same situation we were before Trump was even elected president. The only difference, the United States lost face, clout, economic leverage, and trillions of dollars in stock market value. And for what? To go back to the trade agreements that were in place before Trump was elected president. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is a genius at work, I think my cat would make a great alternative.
For some countries, he has reduced the tariff to 10%, and for China, he has increased it to 125%. Let's take a look at what the president said.
The US economy is in a complex state, with many forces shaping its direction, from inflation to global supply chains. In this landscape, President Trump's decision to pose tariffs on almost every country except China is a significant policy shift. For a long time, Trump has argued that tariffs were a powerful tool for American businesses, particularly the manufacturing sector. But now we are seeing a pause on those tariffs, and the question arises, why the sudden change? Let's start by recalling what Trump promised when he first imposed tariffs. The idea was simple. By placing tariffs on imports, especially from China, he believed that American companies would be incentivized to move production back to the US, which would create more American jobs. He also argued that these tariffs would give US companies an advantage by making foreign goods more expensive, thus stimulating domestic production. At first glance, this seemed like a winning strategy, particularly for the manufacturing sector, which had been in decline for decades. The reality, however, was more complicated. While some industries, particularly steel and aluminium manufacturing, saw a short-term boost, the overall impact on tariffs was not as strategy forward as Trump initially claimed. For one, the tariffs on Chinese imports led to higher prices for goods in the US. Goods that many American consumers rely on. Electronics, appliances, and even clothing saw price hikes, which made every product more expensive for average consumers. These costs were passed down the supply chain, from manufacturers to retailers and ultimately to the consumers.
So this is what he typed out in Truth Social. It says, based on the lack of respect that China has shown to the world markets, I am hereby raising the tariffs charged to China by the United States of America to 125%, effective immediately. At some point, hopefully in the near future, China will realize that the days of ripping off the USA and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. Conversely, based on the fact that more than 75 countries have called representatives of the United States, including departments of Commerce, Treasury, and the USTR to negotiate a solution to the subjects being discussed relative to trade barriers, tariffs, currency manipulation, and non-monetary tariffs, and that these countries have not, at my strong suggestion, retaliated in any way, shape, or form against the United States. I have authorized a 90-day pause and a substantially lower reciprocal tariffs during this period of 10%. Also effective immediately. Thank you for your attention. The bitch bent the knee. His bitch ass bent the fucking knee. You make all these threats and you don't even, like, Trump just showed the world right now that as a nation, all we are is a bunch of barking dogs with no teeth. The only time we have teeth is when it comes to military. Everything else, we got no teeth.
China has 125% tariff increase. Are you fucking me? Now you want to back down? Now you want to be chicken shit? That means that nobody was really coming to the table, because the EU said, okay, we got retaliatory tariffs too. Japan and Korea was willing to negotiate. Countries in fucking Africa was like, oh, we with the shit. Nigeria was with the shit. They said, we don't want none of your stuff no more. Nigeria cut off 25 categories worth of shit that came from America to be stopped at the damn border of Nigeria. I cannot. He's jumping 125% tariffs right away because, according to him, China hasn't shown respect to the global markets. This man is really trying to tank our economy. He really is. You backed out. You a bitch. Now, every other country, get your eyes up and rally behind China.
Moreover, the impact on American manufacturers was mixed. While some companies benefited from a reduction in competition from Chinese imports, others faced rising costs due to the tariffs. Many US companies rely on Chinese-made parts and materials for their products, and these companies were caught in the middle of a trade war that made it harder to do business. They either had to absorb the higher cost or pass them to consumers. In some cases, companies were forced to shift their supply chains to other countries, potentially abandoning manufacturing in the US altogether. Now, Trump's decision to pose tariffs on almost every country while significantly increasing them on China raises even more questions. It seems like a clear contradiction to the original promises of his tariffs strategy. If tariffs were really as effective as Trump argued, why would he stop them for other countries? Is this an admission that the tariff approach wasn't as effective as he hoped?
So he paused, the island full of penguins that doesn't, send us shit. But China, where we get a ton of stuff, that one's still going on and getting larger. And his fucking fanboys are treating this like it's some sort of win. Textbook art of the deal. This is not art of the deal. This is a moron who doesn't know what he's doing, who has to keep doing things, then having it blow up in his face, then walk it back, and then instead of learning from that, does it again and has it blow up in his face again. And if you need to understand, why is this happening? Why would he do this? Aside from just, the blanket statement of, he's a moron, the guy who filed bankruptcy 6 times, who somehow managed to run 4 casinos into the ground. The guy who did that isn't good at business, which is shocking to some, apparently. But if you need any further evidence, allow me to give you Exhibit A, which is, where did Donald Trump come up with the idea for tariffs in the first place? Take a walk back in time with me, back to when he was going to run for office the first time in 2016. He had no economic plan. He didn't know what to do. So what did he do in response to that? He reached out to his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. He said, hey, find me economic advisors. Find me somebody. I kind of like this. I like that. China's bad, I guess. Find me something. So Jared did a deep dive, decided to do some serious research. And by that, I mean he went on Amazon and looked at books about the economy. Not read them, just looked at them, like the covers and the titles, until he saw one that he liked, Death by China. And he was like, ooh, that's a good title. I like the book art. This book that was co-written by Peter Navarro. And then, without reading the book, he contacted Peter Navarro and was like, would you like to be a part of Donald Trump's plan? Would you like to help form his economic plan? Peter Navarro was like, yes. And something Peter Navarro wrote about was tariffs. But that wasn't just his idea. He was citing someone else who was like an expert in tariffs, a guy named Ron Vera. He cited him multiple times across 6 different books. He wrote about how Ron Vera believed in tariffs. Tariffs are a good thing. Tariffs are what can turn it around for us, et cetera, et cetera. So then Donald Trump gets elected in 2016. Shortly after he's elected, a memo gets sent out by Ron Vera, sent out around D.C., saying that tariffs are the way to go. This is the thing. Sent from an email purported to belong to Ron Vera. So Ron Vera and Peter Navarro are pushing tariffs onto Donald Trump, that he should be doing this. There's only one problem with Ron Vera.
Ron Vera doesn't exist. He never has. The economics expert that Peter Navarro has long cited to explain why he's so gung-ho on tariffs, this person, Ron Vera, is a made-up person. He is a fictional person. Peter Navarro invented Ron Vera as his expert source So he could quote this expert source over and over and over again in his crackpot books. Who is Ron Vera? Ron Vera is an anagram of Navarro, which is his last name.
He doesn't exist. His idea was so great and so amazing that he literally couldn't find anyone else that would back it up, so he had to create an imaginary person with an anagram out of his last name in the most narcissistic shit ever. Meanwhile, the tariffs on China are still happening, but China pays for those, right?
With these 104% tariffs that went into effect, we think that China is going to have to pay for it, but it tells a story of a special needs toy importer. He's been paying a tariff because he gets stuff from China, $26,000 a year. His tariff bill went from $26,000 at midnight to $346,000. It sounds like he's going to have to go ahead and close down part of his business.
So that's a situation where toys for children with certain disabilities are gone. There's a lot of people who just aren't going to care about that. They might care, though, if the base price of iPhones goes up to like $3,500. And that's just part of it. It's not just that the base price would go up that much. It's also the fact that there will be much fewer quantities. Like, they'll sell out and you won't be able to get them. They just won't be available because they won't be able to manufacture them at the level that they currently do. This is not the art of the deal. This is the art of fucking everything up royally.
This sudden shift could also be seen as a response to growing concerns within the US business community. Many companies have expressed concern over the unpredictability of trade policies and the harm these policies have caused to their bottom lines. Manufacturers, retailers, and agricultural producers all rely on stable trade relations within foreign countries, and the ongoing trade war with China has thrown those relations into turmoil. By posing tariffs on many countries, Trump could be trying to alleviate some of that pressure and avoid further harm to the US economy. It's also possible that this pause is a calculated move to avoid the economic fallout ahead of what is expected to be a challenging year. Inflation remains high, and rising costs are eating into the purchasing power of the US consumers. At the same time, the Federal Reserve is attempting to curb inflation through interest rate hikes, which further dampens consumer spending and could lead to slowdown in the economic growth. Posing tariffs could be seen as an attempt to cushion the blow to consumers by reducing the additional cost associated with imported goods. Another crucial aspect of this policy shift is the long-term impact it may have on global trade. The global economy is more interconnected than ever, and the decision made by one country can have ripple effects across the globe. The US is one of the largest economies in the world, and any major shift in trade policy has the potential to disrupt the balance of global trade. Trump's decision to pose tariffs on countries other than China sends a mixed message to US trading partners. On one hand, it could be seen as a move toward stabilizing trade relations. On the other hand, the increase in tariffs on China signals that the US is still firmly committed to challenging China's economic practices. The broader implications for US businesses and consumers are also significant. The US economy is heavily dependent on products, particularly from China, which is a major supplier of goods such as electronics, clothing, and consumer products. If the tariffs on Chinese goods continue to rise, it will further increase the cost of these goods, which will be felt most acutely by American consumers. In addition, US businesses that rely on Chinese-made parts will face higher costs, which could reduce their competitiveness in the global marketplace. But the real question is, what is the end game? If Trump's goal is to curb China's trade practices and bring jobs back to the US, is this tariff strategy really the way to achieve that? It's unclear whether higher tariffs on Chinese goods will lead to significant changes in China's economic policies, and there is no guarantee that it will bring more manufacturing jobs back to the US. In fact, some industries may find it more cost-effective to outsource their production to other countries in Asia or Latin America rather than reshoring to the US. The broader implications for US businesses and consumers are also significant. The US economy is heavily dependent on products, particularly from China, which is a major supplier of goods such as electronics, clothing, and consumer products. If the tariffs on Chinese goods continue to rise, it will further increase the cost of these goods, which will be felt most acutely by American consumers. In addition, US businesses that rely on Chinese-made parts, which could reduce their competitiveness in the global marketplace. But the real question is, what is the end game? If Trump's goal is to curb China's trade practices and bring jobs back to the US, is this tariff strategy really the way to achieve that? It's unclear whether higher tariffs on Chinese goods will lead to significant changes in China's economic policies, and there is no guarantee that it will bring more manufacturing jobs back to the US. In fact, some industries may find it more cost-effective to outsource their production to other countries in Asia or Latin America rather than reshoring to the US. There's also the question whether the tariff has helped US consumers more than it has helped US businesses. As mentioned earlier, higher tariffs have led to increased prices for everyday goods. While certain industries have benefited, the overall economic impact has been a mixed bag, and many Americans are feeling the squeeze. Rising prices and inflation have made it harder for average consumers to make the ends meet, and this could have a long-term impact on consumer confidence and spending. So why is Trump taking such drastic actions now? One possibility is that he's trying to show up support among his base, particularly those who view China as a major economic threat. But other possibility is that he's simply reacting to economic realities of the moment. The US economy is facing a host of challenges, and Trump's tariff policies may not have had the intended effect of revitalizing American manufacturing or reducing the trade deficit. In conclusion, Trump's decision to pose tariffs on almost every country except China raises more questions than answers. The strategy of using tariffs to boost US manufacturing and reduce the trade deficit has been far from straightforward. While some industries have benefited, the overall economic impact has been mixed, and consumers have been hit with high prices. Now, with the pause of tariffs and the sharp increase in tariffs on China, it seems like Trump is rethinking his approach in response to the economic challenges the US is facing. However, it's unclear whether this strategy will lead to the desired results, or if it's simply a move to avoid further economic disruption. What is clear is that the global economy is shifting, and the US will need to adapt to these changes to remain competitive on the world stage. Anyway, guys, let me know what your thoughts are about this particular topic, and also remember to subscribe, like, and share as well. And until next time, bye-bye.